I would like to ask you about the third round of negotiations in Istanbul. You did not comment on it. I would like to ask if you received an answer from Kiev about the proposal that was announced in Istanbul, about the three groups that could act in an online mode. How do you evaluate the course of negotiations and the prospects? And one more thing, just the other day, Zelensky said, even today, that there is no point in negotiating with Russia now. We need to wait for the regime to change.
In principle, we can wait. If the Ukrainian leadership thinks that now is not the time, but we need to wait. Please. We are ready to wait. This is the first thing. The second thing is that our political regime is based on the constitution of the Russian Federation. And the government is formed strictly in accordance with the main laws of the state. What can you not say about Ukraine? I do not want to go into details now, but today's government is not based on the Ukrainian constitution. The constitution is clearly violated, but I do not want to go into details. As for the negotiations, negotiations are always in demand and always important, especially if it is a desire for peace. I generally think it is positive. How can you not think it is positive that hundreds of people have returned home? It is positive. As you know, we have sent thousands of bodies of Ukrainian soldiers. In response, we have received dozens of our guys who laid their heads for their motherland. Is this not positive? Of course, it is positive. As for any disappointments on the part of anyone, all disappointments arise from excessive expectations. This is a well-known common rule. But in order to approach a solution to the issue in a peaceful manner, we need to have substantive talks. And we need to do this not in public, but in a calm and quiet manner. This is why we proposed to create three groups, which you mentioned. In general, the reaction of the Ukrainian side was positive. We agreed that we would be able to hold such talks without cameras, without any political crackdown, in a calm manner, and seek a compromise. They have not started this work yet. But in general, I repeat, the first reaction, as it seemed to us, was positive. Therefore, we expect this process to be completed.
I have one more question. Tell me, have all the conditions for a long-term truce that you announced a year ago remained?
Yes, these conditions have certainly remained the same. These are not conditions, but goals. I have formulated Russia's goals. Until that moment, we were told that it was not clear what Russia wanted. We formulated them in June last year in consultation with the leadership of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Everything is clear there. But the main thing is to eradicate the causes of this crisis. This is the basis. And of course, humanitarian issues, security issues in the broad sense of the word, Russia's and Ukraine's security issues. By the way, the Ukrainian delegation said that it would make sense to talk about Russia's and Ukraine's security in the context of general European security. This is what one of the leaders of the Ukrainian delegation said. And in general, we believe that this is correct. We share it. And humanitarian issues, this is the Russian language, this is the independence and dignified conditions for the development of the Orthodox Church, of Christians, of the Church of Ukraine. All this in general should be discussed and should be the basis of a long-term, without any time limits, peace.
Dear Alexander Grigorievich, Vladimir Vladimirovich, I can't help but ask, For the sake of the day, the West is constantly sanctioning. The European Union is literally stamping package by package. We have already counted the 18th. In this regard, will the strategy of the Union state change somehow? How will we react and change our anti-sanction strategy that was before?
We have already changed everything that we needed. If someone closed the door in front of us, there are a lot of open doors in the world. Both Russia and Belarus have made a very serious turnaround today. I think time will pass. The world will still appreciate what we have done. It was just impossible to imagine at the beginning of the 20s. Nevertheless, we did it, we turned it around, we live, and we will live. In our world, no one will be able to put us on their knees. We are determined to defend our interests. But Russia is a treasure trove of useful minerals and technologies. Therefore, it takes time for us to finally prove to our doubters and those around us that we are capable of a lot. Well, yesterday you heard a meeting with a diplomat. I said that there are no sanctions. There are no sanctions, and that's it. There is nothing to say about them. As soon as we start talking about sanctions, then everyone refers who does not want to work to the fact that it is difficult. No, and that's all. Sanctions are opportunities. Therefore, I think that in Russia, just as we understand this issue more accurately, we have always been and will always be there. This was also said yesterday. Do not worry about these sanctions. Well, what was asked by Vladimir Vladimirovich about the negotiations and his position in this case, I absolutely support. The president is very right to say that war is war, but negotiations are always conducted. The Americans fought in Vietnam for 9 lands, and since the first day of the war, they have been negotiating. And the Ukrainians' mistake, I observe this, is that they demand the impossible. What they say and what Russia proposes, the president has just voiced. It is decided at the table of negotiations. There may be compromises, retreats, turns. And like this, in the forehead, you said it right. This is for the public. This is because we talk a lot, but we don't want to do anything. Therefore, I publicly said the statement of our mutual friend for whom we were so worried, Donald Trump. I remember our worries that he would win and so on. There are 50, 60, 10 days. This is also not how politics is done. If he wants peace, he must connect carefully, thoroughly. This is a military conflict, and it is impossible to indicate there, especially in a nuclear state. Listen. This is just ridiculous. I recently met with Vladimir Vladimirovich. I talked to the Americans. I openly told him this. These are his close friends. I say to the president, tell him to do everything carefully. And you can agree, everything is again an air truce. I say, yes, Russia is interested in this, and President Putin. But you don't want this. Tell Zelensky, let him do it. So that there are no flying devices and people don't fall on their heads. Already, the last, case, when already in Belarus, 59 kilograms of explosives filled with balls and so on. Well, it didn't explode well. The explosion hit a 10-story building where ordinary people lived. Therefore, this is a dangerous escalation. We need to resolve this and we need to do it carefully. And the fact that the Russians agree in Istanbul with the Ukrainians, Vladimir Vladimirovich knows. He called me, remember, thanked me, to continue in Belarus. We do everything, these exchanges at the border. The Ukrainians opened the border at the sites. What they did? Railway communication was restored there. That is, there is a movement, and the children shouted a lot. Please, Russians, come look! Negotiations are being held with the authorized Human Rights Commissioner of Russia and Ukraine. Negotiations are being held on children. What did Russia do wrong? Children remained homeless. Children remained. They were fed, clothed. No, they were accused of this. For what? Please, let's negotiate. And the exchange is underway.
It turned out that there is no such number of children. You say, please, let's go to the lists. There is nothing.
There is no list. Therefore, public oppression is taking place. It is not in our favor. We just need to sit down at the table and agree on any positions. Yes, 3 rounds have passed. Well, I like it in Belarus. Well, it's good. We discussed it with Vladimir Vladimirovich. Yes, at least on the moon anywhere. But we need to sit down at the table. Negotiations should be discussed, not thrown stones at each other. I want to meet Putin. Well, why are you shouting about it? Prepare an appropriate request, statement, and so on. The Americans talk about it. Prepare and then sit down and sign. And call Trump, Macron, anyone stormer. Well, we need to prepare it. And what do they not understand? They understand. And if they say so, they don't want to. They don't want to. We just play for the public.
If you allow me one more question, you said that there is an extensive agenda between our countries. Will you discuss it? Will you? Will you discuss security issues? And in particular, maybe there is already clarity on the Oreshnik.
The specifics are that the military, although they are specific people and are in a hurry everywhere, wanted to place this Oreshnik, the Belarusian position, somewhere next year. Vladimir Vladimirovich said that this year we should basically end these processes of construction, creation, and so on. We are not retreating from this yet.
No. The first thing I want to say in this regard is that we have produced the first serial Oreshnik, the first serial missile, yes, and it entered the troops. Now the series has started working. The first thing. The second thing is that our specialists, both Belarusian and Russian military specialists, have chosen a place for future positions. And now we are working on preparing these positions. So most likely, we will close this issue by the end of the year.
Well, we are not retreating. We are doing it calmly. There is no need to rush ahead. As soon as it is ready, not only the positions, it's simple. As you said, it's simple to build. It is necessary that the combat equipment, charges, and missiles are not cheap, and to protect them. Yes, and to protect, of course, everything is according to plan. Do not worry about safety.
Vladimir Vladimirovich, how do you perceive the current situation at the SVO, or in general, the dynamics?
Yesterday, as usual, I discussed these issues with the Minister of Defense and the Chief of Staff several times, and I knew that we would be approached by the press. And I asked them myself, I said, how to answer such a question? The situation at the SVO. The answer was, please answer honestly. Now they will see it and remember. And what does it mean to be honest? It means that our troops are advancing along the entire line of combat contact, both in the border area and in Donetsk, the Republic of Lugansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson, everywhere, in all areas. Somewhere more, somewhere less. But positive activity, thanks, of course, to the courage and heroism of our troops. We are now in a special place where a temple has been erected in memory of all our soldiers who died in all times for the fatherland. But now we are talking about the SVO. Today's positive dynamics at the front are connected, of course, with the heroism of our guys who are now moving forward. But we owe this to those of our soldiers who remained on the battlefield and gave their lives for the fatherland, because it was they who created the conditions for today's people, who are in the ranks today, to move forward. and have such an opportunity. This is a shared merit. In this sense, we have not lost a single thing. No, in vain. This is in general. Well, the dynamics are clear. Just recently, we heard that a new unpopulated area, Chasov Yar, was taken. This is a fairly large unpopulated area. We have already heard that this does not correspond to reality. I can tell you and declare to you that this is completely true. Moreover, the Ministry of Defense announced it only, I think, yesterday. In fact, Chasov Yar was taken a few days ago. The so-called purges were carried out, although probably there were attempts to counterattack. In addition, such statements that this is false information from our side indicate that the top political leadership of Ukraine is not very informed about the course of events, but these are their problems. But in general, the dynamics, I repeat, are positive. Just recently, remember, everyone was talking, including our friends, about the need for Russia to make a strategic defeat on the battlefield. And today they have a different, one but fiery passion to stop our offensive, whatever it takes, either with promises of good life, or with some threats, or with pre-armament, pre-equipment of the armed forces. To stop and then to deal with these issues of pre-equipment, pre-armament. I repeat once again, we need a long and strong peace on good, basic grounds, which would satisfy both Russia and Ukraine, would ensure the security of all countries, and probably the right-wing negotiators on the Ukrainian side, who are so careful, by the way, but still laid out the idea that it is necessary to talk about European security as a whole.
From Minsk to Moscow, more and more often, there is a dialogue about the world, about the mood, about how to regulate all the difficulties. We only hear about the West, about the diktats and ultimatums. And even the latest deal of the EU and the USA is simply called a disgrace for the EU. This diktat, ultimatums, trade wars, the diktat of debt, what can the world economy lead to, and how should we? What do we need from this?
Recently, the Russian leadership correctly stated that such a continuation, although it has already happened, will lead to deindustrialization of Europe, although it has already happened. And this process continues. They will destroy Europe, the European Union. It was once said that the Americans also have such a goal, to weaken this center of power, the European Union. It was not a weak organization. This will happen. And they should not have been dragging us face to face. I have also said this more than once, but to be together. The European Union and Russia, this power, if it were to unite, then, of course, the Americans would never be able to allow it. It's scary for them. It's scarier than China would be. If it were to unite, it would be a force. But they don't understand this. They probably don't need it. I look at these leaders, I don't want to characterize them under Vladimir Vladimirovich. Some of them are already leaving, as they are called, the lame ducks. Others have only reached a rating of less than 20%. The people don't like this policy. Why don't the people of Europe like it? The main reason is their position on Ukraine. They don't want it. But there are billions and trillions of weapons and help from Ukraine. I don't know. This is probably wrong.
You know, just recently, politicians and so-called political circles in general said that the European Union is an economic giant, but a political dwarf. These are not my words. I don't want to offend anyone. We ourselves read this in Western sources, but, and I have always said this, in the modern world, it has always been important, especially today, that sovereignty plays a key role including for economic development. It was clear that the European Union does not have a lot of sovereignty. Today, it has become obvious that it does not exist at all, and this is followed by economic losses. The loss of political sovereignty now leads to the loss of economic sovereignty and to colossal losses. Therefore, as I have always said, one of the key tasks, including the task of the European Union, is to strengthen Russia's sovereignty.
The topic of Ukraine, one way or another, is raised in all questions. Recent scandals in Ukraine related to anti-corruption departments. What do you think? How can you comment on what has happened?
How can you comment on scandals with anti-corruption?
The West is now pressuring Zelensky. I observe this and think, well, what did Zelensky want? He took billions, hundreds of billions of money. The West says, well, we want to see where this money will go to be spent. And they once offered to create an anti-corruption bureau and an anti-corruption prosecutor's office. This is exactly the sovereignty. He took the money. Whoever gave it says, we want to see how. They agreed. Now they have woken up. Well, probably, or the elections, they want to organize something else. This is for the people. They tried to do it. The West quickly organized, said no. And 2 days later, or how long later, he said no. 2 hours later, Rada cancelled everything. He signed the law. What sovereignty? No sovereignty. No sovereignty. And there is no need to be outraged. You took the money, and the one who gave it wanted to control you as a non-sovereign state where you put the money. And where did you put it? You know, during this time, people have built solid palaces on the Azure coast and further on, and they feel good. And even some presidents blame Ukraine. Therefore, this is a mess. You can't call it otherwise. And the basis of this is the loss of sovereignty and independence.
In general, corruption is a negative phenomenon in society, which is characteristic for many, if not for all countries of the world. There is nothing unusual here. The question is in the degree of corruption and in the ability of society, in readiness and ability to fight this phenomenon. But what is readiness and ability of society to fight corruption? That is, society itself should be able to be ready, want, and be able to fight corruption. And this, if society is influenced by such processes, is part of democracy. But democracy cannot be brought in from the outside, just as it cannot be brought in from the outside to fight such phenomena as corruption, especially those who themselves suffer from corruption. So that there is no corruption in Europe or the United States. It is legalized there. Lobbying institutions are created there. What is this? They give money to representatives of all levels of government. That's all. This is also corruption. And here it is clear that Ukraine is a country where corruption is really rampant. Can it be fought from the outside? As Alexander Grigorievich said, these various bureaus have been created. They do not submit to the authorities at all, neither to the president, nor to the parliament, nor to anyone. This is an external institute. Listen, I just said whether it is possible to bring democracy from the outside, including the Institute for the Fight Against Corruption. When was this institute created in Ukraine? In 2015. And what is it today? 2025?
They fought corruption.
Of course. So what? It has been around for 10 years and everyone around the world is shouting Ukraine is being guarded by corruption. Yes, it is. But the effectiveness of the institutes brought in from the outside is zero. This is not what we should be doing. We should not impose external governance institutions on the people, in this case, on the Ukrainian people. Instead, we should help people to stand on their own 2 feet and create these institutes. It is impossible for people to elect a government, elect a president, a parliament, and not influence the processes that take place in society. This is a humiliating state, a complete lack of sovereignty. Yes, that's right. They tried to change something there, to bring back at least some of the sovereignty. They did not like it, so they whistled and clapped. Then they turned everything back. They should not have done anything. They should have just sat in one place. Then everything would have been covered and smooth. They just disgraced themselves. But the very idea that at least some of the sovereignty should be brought back is, of course, correct. There is nothing to say here.
It is difficult, not fast. In this regard, you have already partially said, but nevertheless, is Belarus ready to provide some kind of assistance? Is it necessary for the Russians?
If necessary, he will always say he will connect Belarus to the process. Today, I just said that we agreed in Istanbul. Important questions, exchange of prisoners of war, wounded and so on. I called Vladimir Vladimirovich and told him that we treat everyone equally. He supports it. People, Ukrainians, Russians, they are warriors. Someone is wounded, someone else. All those who wish, we immediately go to the hospital if it is urgent to provide assistance. And there are such people, not only prisoners of war, but also bodies. Ukrainians do not trust anyone. Let the Belarusians, roughly speaking, carry the bodies. Some there, others here. Only Belarusians. Railways have restored the way for refrigerators to fit there. Not only let the Belarusians sit behind the steering wheel of this steam locomotive and carry refrigerators back and forth. We were looking for people. We had to look for Afghans who fought in Afghanistan. We found railway workers who were engaged in this. We were asked. Russians and Ukrainians agreed with this. We do it. If necessary, we will offer more. Vladimir Vladimirovich said very correctly. My point of view completely coincides. We are absolutely on the subject of Chasov Yar. This is really, I don't know, maybe there are still some uncleared houses on the outskirts. I don't know how today, but Chasov Yar is the road to Kramatorsk. In fact, it is the center of the Ukrainian armed forces. And what's next? I say this because Ukraine must ask for it today. Vladimir Vladimirovich, let's sit down at the negotiating table. Let's make an agreement. Otherwise, in a month or two, I don't know, there won't even be any defensive structures there. The Russians will gnaw it all off, seize it, and go on fighting.
They will return it.
Yes, they will return it. Therefore, we need to make an agreement. If they want something, they must run to it. I have gathered all the information on the front line. I also agreed with our military. It absolutely coincides. In all points, even in the Sumy region, you are trying to create a buffer zone. There is an offensive everywhere. Not fast, but slowly. Why am I slow? He says, I feel sorry for the people. Right, slow, but confident. And not so many people will die. You know, like in the Great Patriotic War, they threw hundreds of thousands there and hundreds of thousands died. In Poland, only 600,000 of our Soviet people died. There is no such war in Ukraine. Quiet, calm. But it makes it possible for the Ukrainians to say, listen, let's sit down and make an agreement. They don't want that.
As for Ukraine's participation in the negotiation process, we are very grateful to Alexander Yuryevich and Belarus for the support and assistance that Belarus and the President of Belarus provide us. We are in constant contact. I am constantly informing Alexander Yuryevich about the results of this negotiation process, and all the exchanges take place in Belarus. The negotiation process began there in 2022, and then it moved to Istanbul. We know Alexander Yuryevich's position and that of the entire Belarusian leadership and the Belarusian people who strive for peace between our two countries, between Russia and Ukraine. Alexander Yuryevich takes the most active part in this. Thank you.